Good morning. What a beautiful and vibrant place we all call home here in the Metro West. I'm Jay Kim, the Executive Director of the Foundation for Metro West, and we're so glad you've joined us today for one of our Spring Inspiration virtual series events. Many of you may know of our Spring Inspiration Breakfast, which is one of the Foundation's largest fundraising events each year. It goes without saying, the COVID-19 pandemic had different plans for us this year. But despite those plans, we know how important it is to gather the community, to feel inspired and connected, and to welcome a new season together. I'm incredibly grateful to our generous sponsors for their unwavering support in helping to make today's event and the entire Spring Inspiration virtual series possible. We are proud to serve as your community foundation, and we are here to make a world of difference in our own backyards by bringing together donors, nonprofits, businesses, and the community to make the region we all love and call home a better place for everyone. For me, spring represents the start of something new, the blossoming of new things, new beginnings, new inspirations and hope. After a year of what felt like Groundhog Day, it feels so good to share this moment and our time together with all of you. It is our mission at the Foundation to be a resource, convener, and most importantly, a friend and support to our neighbors whenever they may need us most. Events like this one allows us to do just that. Thank you for spending part of your morning with us today. We hope you find this event both educational and inspiring, and we hope to see you virtually and someday in person at many more of our events soon. Thank you for being here today.
Hello, welcome, and good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Okokin, and I will be your host this morning. I would like to welcome all of you to the virtual Spring Inspiration Breakfast. This year, we have the theme of inspiration from our neighbors. Now, of course, we are all here thanks to our Spring Inspiration virtual series sponsors. Our patrons of this event include the Cook family, the Gannon Family Fund, Pamela and Steve Lesser, Middlesex Savings Bank, R.W. Holmes Realty Company Incorporated, and the Yale Charitable Foundation. Our founders are Brian and Susan M. McCougian, Needham Bank, Carol and Jack O'Neill, and Peter and Jessica Walker. We are so grateful for all of the sponsors who have helped make today's event possible, and also to our entire Spring Inspiration virtual series. They all made this possible. Now, as Jay mentioned in the video earlier, spring represents a time of hope and renewal, and the Foundation is looking forward to gathering every May. The Foundation looks forward to gathering every May to celebrate this new season with you. This is the Foundation's 8th year hosting the Spring Inspiration Breakfast, and it's grown to be one of the Foundation's largest and most important fundraising events of the year. This celebration of youth and philanthropy always reminds us of the generosity of our neighbors. And over the course of the last year, as you all know, Metro West neighbors have shown up in unimaginable ways for one another through their community foundation. We know that Metro West has always been a generous community, but that was magnified, absolutely, in the way that everyone has come together to support emergency relief efforts. And today is another opportunity for you all to show up for our community foundation so that we can continue to carry out their mission in the community, being there for the most vulnerable neighbors. We have this morning an incredible lineup of storytellers who are going to be joining us, including this year's honorees, Alice and Elizabeth Cook, who will tell their own story of community and inspiration from their town right here in the Metro West. We hope that at the end of this event, each of you is feeling inspired to make a gift to the Foundation so that they can continue doing the important work of in the community and being there for our neighbors. Though we will be bringing this event to you virtually, your support is still absolutely critical to the Foundation's work, and we'd like to get started first with a conversation with Jay Kim, the Executive Director of the Foundation for Metro West. Now, I know that everyone is kind of itching and excited to get going with the stories this morning, these stories of community and hope. But first, let's just take a quick pause, take a little bit of a moment, and have a bit of a conversation with Jay. Jay is the newly appointed executive director of the Foundation for Metro West, and Jay has spent much of his career in the philanthropy space all over the country. For nearly 10 years, he's called Sherburne home, which is where much of his family, including his mother and his sister, reside. Jay is paramountly committed to the community, family, and philanthropy, but let's hear more about that directly from Jay. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Teresa.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you for hosting. Good to see you.
I'm delighted to be here with you. Happy spring.
Happy spring, yes.
So the Foundation for Metro West has been doing some incredible work in the region for the past 25 years. Can you tell us about the importance of having such a strong community foundation in Metro West Boston?
Absolutely. You know, having a strong community foundation in any community, I believe, is absolutely critical. And, you know, it centers around this core concept that community foundations are really trying to engage more and more people in philanthropy, trying to get them involved, and also trying to mobilize those resources and then get those resources to improve the lives of everyone that lives in the region. So, you know, a really great example of that is what happened during the pandemic, as you referenced, right? People really showed up for their neighbors. And so when the pandemic hit, we immediately set up these 2 emergency relief funds, and we made it easy for anybody that wanted to help to give, whether it was an individual, a family, a business. And so, you know, we were able to make that easy. And so when people made their donation, we were able to take those dollars and get them to the nonprofit organizations that we work closely with, who are really serving our most vulnerable neighbors. So I think it was just a great example. And unfortunately, the pandemic was, you know, horrible, but it was a great example to demonstrate the importance of a strong community foundation.
Absolutely. It's such critical work because so often people want to do good, but they're like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to give. And the foundation makes it easy, like you said. It gives a centralized location where folks can do good, do the good that they want to be doing.
Absolutely.
So the Spring Inspiration Breakfast celebrates youth and family philanthropy in the Metro West. Why is it important to make philanthropy family-oriented instead of just an individual behavior?
No, it's a great question, and something that we are really focused on is engaging the entire family. So we talk a lot about philanthropy, of course, and we define it, though, as giving of your time, talent, and treasure. So the 3 T's, as we always call it. So, you know, I think when it comes to engaging with your family, yes, it's fun. It's a good thing to do as a family. It's you know, that's always nice. But what we think about is how it imparts to the next generation, you know, that importance of community, that importance of giving back. And so that is why I think, you know, engaging the entire family in this kind of activity is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, keeping on the theme of spring, I mean, it's like you're planting seeds in your family, right? You're kind of teaching that lesson and then letting it grow. And that's something that can happen throughout generations.
Absolutely. You hope that passes on generation to generation, and then you can engage more and more people around this concept of helping your neighbors.
Absolutely. So in your opinion, Jay, from where should we as a community pull the hope and inspiration that we need to continue to show up for this region every day?
You know, what happened during this pandemic, as you referenced earlier again, is what is so inspiring to me is how people showed up, right? And really, there was a terribly challenging time, you know, lockdowns and, you know, people were doing remote work and remote school, and you couldn't see your friends and family. Many families didn't know where their next meal was coming from, right? You know, worried about housing and all these challenges. Yet we saw through our emergency relief funds hundreds and hundreds of gifts, people really wanting to support their neighbors. They were large gifts, like a $100,000 gift from Middlesex Savings Bank, but there were small gifts as well. And, you know, a great example is there were 3 young middle school students who decided that they were going to make masks and then sell them, and then take the proceeds from those masks and give it to us, to our emergency relief fund, so that they could help people. And that, to me, is such an inspirational story. And it's stories like that that give me hope that, we can get through these challenging times if we really support each other.
Absolutely. And those are the kinds of lessons that we're talking about, right? That are built in a family that's like, this is the kind of family that we are. This is the kind of giving and the kind of giving back that we care about. And then you have kids initiating that on their own after a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Jay, we're in springtime and we're celebrating springtime, and there's so many indicators of spring. My personal favorite indicator of spring, unpopular opinion, but my personal favorite indicator of spring around Boston is when there's young people out on their road bikes and it's just like really noisy and they take up the whole street. That's my favorite indicator of spring. It's like, now we know that it's warm outside. What is your favorite indicator of spring?
I do like to garden. So, and I love, the flowers and just the beauty of spring. So to me, it's when the flowers are blooming, when the apple trees are blooming and you see just the beautiful colors in the flowers. And so then I know it's time for me to go out there and start planting and getting our garden ready. So that to me is, and it's happening right now, which is really exciting.
Yes. I drove past a field the other day and there was, in a heart shape on the side of the road, this gigantic heart shape of daffodils. And I was like, someone really took the care to plant that,
Absolutely. That takes some effort.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, dude, it's springtime. We're here for it.
Absolutely.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for chatting with me. Yes. We'll see you more a bit later.
Excellent. Thank you, Teresa.
Now, over the past few weeks, I've had the pleasure of getting to know this organization, getting to know the foundation, and the fantastic and very important work that you all are doing here in the Metro West. And even in that short period of time, it's clear how important the role this community foundation is playing in the region, and how they've been doing it for so long and are continuing to do this work. We're grateful for all of your contributions, as Jay said, and we're so delighted to be sharing this morning of stories with all of you. Now let's get to those stories. Our first storytellers are Elizabeth and Alice Cook, a mother-daughter duo who've been involved in local philanthropy for as long as Elizabeth can remember. Over the last few years, they've also teamed up with the Foundation for Metro West through the Youth in Philanthropy program, which I think is known by the nickname YIP, a leadership program that aims to bring together the next generation of philanthropists. The dedication shown by these two is a testament to everything Jay discussed about the importance of family and philanthropy and how those seeds are planted and grown throughout a family. The foundation is very proud to celebrate Alice and Elizabeth as this year's community honorees. After we hear their story, we're going to hear from Jay and the storytellers, as he was fortunate enough to sit down with them after their story to learn more about what inspires them and how they as a family have been impacted by the Foundation's Youth in Philanthropy program. Without further ado, I would like for you to join me in welcoming our community storytellers, Elizabeth and Alice Cook.
It was 9:30 on a Saturday morning, and cars were rushing down Cottage Street on their way to their weekend plans. Alice's head was swiveling from left to right, while I was watching the road, an uncontrollable smile on my face.
And I was like, Mom, what's going on? What's with the goofy grin?
To which I responded, Alice, it's Scouting for Food. You know I love Scouting for Food. It's my favorite thing that we do together.
I did know that. It was impossible not to. That grin had made an appearance several times this week, as we lined up paper grocery bags, as we stapled lists of requested items from the food pantry to them, and as I headed out with my friends to drop the bags off at over 100 houses last Saturday. But today's grin was broader. She was practically beaming, even as we struggled to find a place to pull over.
We managed to find a spot, and Alice hopped out and headed up to the first house. As she grabbed the bag that had been left outside, which I soon found out was filled with cans of salmon, one of the food pantry's most requested items, I watched as she heaved it up in both arms to carry it back to the car carefully so that the cans wouldn't break through the bottom of the bag and spill out onto the street. The second house had left 2 bags out, and as she was jogging back to the car with those, a woman out walking her dog began to wave and shout. She had forgotten to leave her bags out when she left the house that morning and was so happy that she had caught Alice and she'd be able to participate this year. In the car, the goofy grin stayed on my face, even as tears flooded my eyes. Watching Alice wrestle with the bag and interact with the neighbor made me realize just how much she'd grown up since the first time we had done this together when she was just in first grade and the bag was nearly as big as she was. Now she was hopping confidently back into the front seat, fully owning this responsibility.
By the time we were finished on Cottage Street, the back of the car was half full, and we still had about 80 houses to go. I thought back to the previous Saturday when I dropped the empty bags and flyers off. It had been a beautiful day, and I had asked some of my friends if they wanted to go for a walk with me, a frequent pandemic activity. I did not, however, tell them what this walk in particular would entail, and when they arrived at my house, I handed them each a bag of 40 bags. What are we doing? Asked Charlotte, looking at the bags. We are scouting for food, I told her, which of course did not provide any more clarity, so I explained. Scouting for food is this thing in Wellesley to do a huge food drive for the food pantry. The whole town is divided into routes of 20 or so houses, and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts each choose a route, drop off flyers, and come back the next week to pick up the food. Wait, said Riley, do people actually do this? Fill up the bags and leave them out? Oh yeah, I said, not everyone does it, but about half the people do it, and it ends up being a lot of food.
Today, we were picking up those very same bags, but now they were filled with food. Driving around, we laughed about the year that our route included a lot of houses on Route 9, forcing us to run down the sidewalk, carrying bags even as cars whizzed past. A friend called later to say, "Did I see you running down Route 9 today with your groceries?" And the year that Alice had to run like a maniac.
Actually, there's been a lot of running.
There has been a lot of running through a flock of freely ranging chickens to grab a couple of bags that had been left out on a front stoop. And the year that we took our German exchange student along with us, and she could not believe that something like this happened in America. At this point, the car was getting really full, and we needed to pile the bags on the seats and in every nook and cranny around the seats. We wondered if we'd even have room for it all. We stopped so that Alice could snap a picture from the front to text to her friends. See, people do actually do this. Even in COVID, especially in COVID, people were so happy to have a way that they could help.
By the time we were done, the back of the car was completely full and there were bags all over the car. When we reached the drop-off, I unloaded the bag from the woman on Cottage Street who had initially forgotten, and the bags that had been full of salmon. They joined the bags that had been closely guarded by a golden retriever dozing in the sun, and the bag that had been a hidden treasure at the end of a long, windy driveway. Our bags joined the bags of all the other scouts who had picked up their food that day too, each with their own individual stories of generosity. After we unloaded, I looked back at Mom. Same goofy grin. But maybe a goofy grin was appropriate. It was amazing to see how everyone rallied to help each other and how so many people, each doing a small thing, could have such an extraordinary impact.
Beth and Alice, this is such an inspirational story of doing good in the local community, especially given the surge in food insecurity we have seen during the pandemic. We really can make a difference in our own backyards, and you two are proof of that. I'm excited to learn more about your inspiration and your connection to local philanthropy, as well as your work as a mother-daughter duo. So let's jump right into it. So the first question is for you, Beth. Your story speaks volumes about how your family has made philanthropy a priority for your kids at such a young age. Why was this so important to you?
Thanks, Jay. I think that when our kids were young, we recognized that we had a lot of privileges. And one of those privileges was the privilege of time that we could spend with our kids. And we wanted to be doing meaningful things with that time. But, with a young family, the time is not always completely up to you. So being involved in little ways, right outside of the house, was a good way to get the kids involved in what we were doing and make a little bit of an impact along the way at the same time. I had a great model for this growing up, that my mom was really involved in local volunteering. And, she was always just finding something to do that would be helpful and make our community just a little bit better, in bits and spurts, as she had time around the rest of her schedule to do that. So that was something that I really wanted to make sure that my kids and my family experienced too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Passing it on from generation to generation. I love that. Alice, this question is for you. You've participated in our Youth and Philanthropy program at the Foundation. What made this program special to you? And how did it build on the values that your parents had already instilled in you at a young age?
I think one of the things that was so incredible about YIP was seeing the heart with which the organizations that we were doing site visits with and reading grants from, the heart with which they tackle their work. And so it was really incredible to see that enthusiasm from people in the community around us. And likewise, the enthusiasm that came from the other people my age who I was collaborating with on my team. And so that drive and that passion for philanthropy and for making the world a better place was something that really fit with what my family tries to do in our day-to-day lives. And so that was a very, very special part of the program.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for being a part of the program. And I know you added so much, and so thank you. The final question for you two today, how do you hope that your work as a mother-daughter duo inspires other families to prioritize local philanthropy? And what are your plans for continuing this work in the future?
So I'll start. I think the story that we told shares a moment that we did that isn't what anyone would describe as capital P philanthropy or capital V volunteering. It was just doing a little bit of something that, together with a lot of other people doing something, ended up making a pretty big impact. And it was easy to do. So I hope that people are inspired to see that even in the midst of a very busy schedule and a very busy life, there are ways that you can kind of fit that volunteering in around what your interests are and what your needs are. So I hope that inspires somebody to say yes to something, even if they're a little hesitant. And one of the things that I think is probably true for anybody who's volunteered is it's easy to see that the volunteer benefits so much from the volunteering. So I think people go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to make a difference for this other person, but it actually makes a difference for you. And I think that's one of the things that we've really enjoyed together. Alice is heading off to college next year, so we're going to be making our impacts in different local communities, but maybe you want to talk about how you're going to make an impact.
Well, I would also just add, especially with our Scouting for Food story, I think that I've done Scouting for Food in so many different ways over the years. I've had and it's always been incredibly fun, which is not something that people always associate with philanthropy, but it's been an incredibly fun experience. Doing it at first with mom, and then I've done it with my sister. I've done it with a car full of friends in the pre-pandemic era. And then, of course, this year doing it with friends just out and about walking, which is also an amazing way to get other people involved and have a great time doing something that also benefits other people. So going forward in future philanthropy opportunities, I'm definitely excited to find ways to make it really fun and a great social effort also.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have a young daughter. I'm going to have her watch this so she can use you as a role model. So Alice and Beth, on behalf of the Foundation for Metro West, I would like to thank you for all you do in the community. I think what is unique about this region is that there is a perception that we don't have a lot of need right out here in this area. Yet when you take a closer look at the issues facing the region, hunger is a huge issue, as you know. So for example, our data through Impact Metro West shows that around 10,000 children in this region are living in poverty. Now, we don't know the full effect, right, and the impact of the pandemic, but I think we know that the number of children living in poverty is increasing and will increase due to the pandemic. So the work you do year over year to help fill the hunger gap makes a huge difference in our community, and especially during this pandemic. So including your entire family in the giving conversation and decision-making, especially through participation in programs like Youth and Philanthropy, is just that much more meaningful. So to recognize the important work that you continue to do, we would like to honor your family by establishing the Cook Family Hunger Relief Fund. And the foundation looks forward to working side by side with you to combat food insecurity in our region.
Thank you. That's an amazing honor and a great opportunity. And we look forward to partnering with you on that.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're excited about it. Thank you for sharing your story with us today and being our 2021 Community Storyteller honorees. Together, we can continue addressing the hunger gap in our region and educate the next generation of philanthropists through Youth and Philanthropy. And hopefully we can have so many more amazing, young people like Alice join our program and continue to do great things in our community. So thank you again.
Thank you.
which is true. I'm going to have my daughter watch this for real, because that was really a really amazing answer and very inspiring, Alice. So thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you so much, Jay, for that interview. And thank you, Beth and Alice, for kicking us off with this morning of stories. It's really just so sweet and so exciting that those two are going to be able to continue their relationship with the foundation. I know that the foundation is really excited for their continued work. And I am also excited for the rest of the stories that we have for you this morning. Our next storyteller up is Sue Schmidt. Sue is a storyteller who lives in Vermont, and her stories are always filled with wild antics of her very, very large family, and this story is no exception. So please join me in welcoming storyteller Sue Schmidt.
Happy spring, everybody. It's baseball season here in Vermont, even though it is actually snowing outside as I'm recording this. It reminds me of my own Major League Baseball career. My family has this tradition that every Sunday when I was growing up, we would meet for Sunday family dinner. This was non-negotiable. You could not get out of Sunday family dinner unless you were really sick and had a doctor's note, which was kind of impossible because my grandfather was a doctor, so it was hard to fake that. I loved family dinner as a kid. As the youngest one in my family, I would get put in the middle of the bench, as we would call it, which was this old church pew that my grandmother had got at a yard sale. And I would just watch people eat and argue and eat and argue. And at the end of our time together, there was always a time when we would tell stories. Some of the stories were from people I'd never met. Some of the stories were little anecdotes of things that had happened during the week. Some were short, some were long, some were funny, some were heartbreaking. Most of them were inappropriate for children. And I loved this time with my family. But there came a time when I realized I wanted to play baseball. Not because I loved the game, not because I was so into sports, but because our boys' baseball team had the best uniforms of any team anywhere. They had these white knickers that had turquoise blue pinstripes that ran all the way down the front. And they had those three-quarter baseball shirts that said on the front, San Remo Screamin' Eagles, and on the back said, Linasa Sand and Gravel, Dig It. Conversely, the girls' softball team had little skirts, which I don't know if you're familiar with the skirt, but it was a very, very big fashion faux pas. And so I announced to my family one Sunday afternoon, I'd like to play baseball. Now, my family, not being sports people, say, sure, why not? Go ahead, sign up. And so the next day I went to school, and instead of signing up for softball, as girls were supposed to play, I signed up for Little League. A few days later, the phone rings, and it's Donna. We all know Donna, right? There's a Donna in every town, in every city, in every state in our country. She has a very tiny little bit of power, but she wields that with so much authority. It's kind of remarkable. And so I hear the conversation on the phone, and Donna says to my mom, I think there's been a mistake. Suzanne has signed up for baseball. And if Donna had just held for 5 seconds, that would have been in. My mother would have held the phone to her chest, would have looked at me and said, did you mean to sign up for baseball? I would have said, yeah, I want to have the uniform. And she would have been like, that's weird. Why can't you just be like all the other girls? And I would have said, okay, forget it. And it would have been over. But Donna couldn't resist. And so she goes on to say, girls can't play baseball. I think to myself, oh, Donna, this is going to end very badly for you. And I watch as that vein in my mother's neck starts to pop out, and she just goes off. What do you mean my daughter can't play baseball? What do you mean girls can't play baseball? She can play whatever she wants. This goes on for a few minutes, and Donna finally, flustered, says, you've got to bring this up with the city council. This is way beyond my pay grade. So my mother says, fine, when's the next meeting? Put us on the agenda. And she slams down the phone. 2 minutes later, she's calling all the relatives. She's like, we're going to the council meeting. Our family needs to show up. And in the next 24 hours, the entire neighborhood knows that this is happening. And so just dozens of people show up to the city council meeting the next week. George Duncan stands up in front of the crowd and he says, "I just want to remind the guests in the room that there'll be no outbursts." My cousin Joanne leans over to me and she says, "What's the likelihood that that's going to happen?" My father was the one to start out. And he stands up and he says, "I have a report that I'd like to submit." And he hands in this 16-page type report. There's a few pages about the history of baseball. There's some pages about the likelihood of injury. There's a whole section on the resilience of the mammary glands. And then he closes with the argument around Title IX that has just been passed. And then my father says, "And if you have any questions, I would encourage you to follow up with our attorney." And he gestures to my uncle. My uncle's not an attorney, never been an attorney, has no connection whatsoever to the law. But what he does have is this beautiful leather briefcase that looks a lot like a briefcase an attorney would have. And then there's some muffled conversation behind the microphone of the city council. And a couple of minutes go by and they say, "Okay, she can play baseball." And I'm in. I'm not going to say the Screaming Eagles is the worst team in the league. The Screaming Eagles is the worst team in the history of baseball. You have to understand that our neighborhood was made up mostly of Italian immigrants, and we are not known for our speed or our agility. We're known more for our endurance, which it turns out is a good thing in Little League because it can take hours to get 9 people around those bases when you're walking every single one of them. So we practice, and the first game comes, and my entire family decides they're going to come and watch the game. I'm on the bench. I'm on the bench for the first inning, the second inning, the third inning. It starts to become clear to me the coach is never going to put me in the game. We get to the 6th inning, and the score is 0-14. We're the 0. And finally, the coach looks at me and says, "Go ahead, go in. We've got 2 outs. It's the last inning that we're going to play." And I'm up at bat. And I'm terrified. I don't know how to play baseball. I don't really know how to hit. I can catch and run pretty well, but I can't hit. And so the pitcher just looks at me, makes some snide comment, throws the ball across the plate. And it's high. It's a lob. And so I wouldn't say I actually swing at it. I more kind of swat at it. And when I swat at it, miraculously, the bat and the ball connect. And I'm so freaked out by this that I drop the bat. And then miraculously, the bat and the ball connect again. And so the ball just kind of rolls forward. And I'm now considering this a double because I've hit the ball twice. And I hear the coach say, "Run!" And I come around first and I get to second. And I come around second and I can hear my family just like going ballistic in the stands. And I look over and I trip and I slide headfirst into third. The coach says, "Time out." He comes out. And he says, "Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to steal home because we've got to get just 1 run on the board. It's important for us to not just completely lose." And so I was like, I'm not going to steal home. I don't understand that. I'm not sure how I even got here. And I've now ruined the uniform that I was really the only reason I'm playing baseball. And so the coach says, "No, this is what you're going to do. You're going to stare down the pitcher, and then you're going to steal." And he goes back to the dugout. And so I look at the mound, and I look at the pitcher, and I stare him down, which looks something like this. And the pitcher looks back at me, something like this. And so he winds up to throw the ball, and I take off. And I run as hard as I possibly can. And the crowd is cheering, and I get to home plate, and I push over the catcher, and I look up as I'm laying on the ground, and the ump says, "Out!" And that's it. It's over. Team goes back to the dugout. The coach gives us some kind of like shame are the nails that built the house of failure speech. I'm so ashamed at this point. I can't even listen to what he's saying. I go back to my family and they say sort of nothing. We get back in the car and we drive back to my grandparents' house and we get ready for dinner. And the whole neighborhood is there now. People have sort of met at the ballpark and now they're all there at dinner. And so we eat and we argue and we eat and we argue. And then the stories start. And this time, it's not a story about somebody I didn't know, and it's not a story about something that happened to somebody in my family this past week. It's a recap of the game. And my aunt says, "Oh my goodness, when you hit that casserole," my uncle jumps in and says, "Bunt?" "Yeah, bunt. When you hit that bunt, wow." And then my grandmother says, "I really liked when you slid into third base head first. That was incredible." And my father said, "Whew, boy, but when you stared down that pitcher, he was terrified." My cousin Joanne leans over to me and she says, "What the hell game were they watching?" And that's when I knew. My baseball career was over. I was going to turn in that coveted uniform the very next day. Not because the Screaming Eagles was the worst team in the league, not because we would likely never win a game, and not because I would likely never come off the bench, but because I knew right then that the bench that I really wanted to be at every Sunday was right there in my grandparents' living room.
Thank you so much, Sue, for that story. I think we've all been really antsy, kind of cooped up at home and socially distanced for over a year now. And Sue's story reminds us that we are exactly where we should be, around the table with our families. Next up, we have storyteller Angie Chapman. Now, Angie's stories are always filled with interesting dynamics of how race is involved in our day-to-day lives, and this story is one more example of that, and also a story of family, community, and togetherness. Please join me in welcoming storyteller Angie Chapman.
It's 2003. And the financial industry is consolidating again, and that means layoffs. And my husband was a target of the layoff. They gave him a nice package, but the other consideration is that I'm pregnant with our third child, and I'm over 35 at the time, so I'm considered a high-risk pregnancy. So we really need insurance because this is before Obamacare. And pregnancy is one of those pre-existing conditions that shows up over time. So my husband is pretty adamant that he's going to look all over the country for a job, and I'm cool with that, So he comes downstairs after finding a position that he's interested in, and he shows me the flyer, and I say, "Where is it?" And it says on the flyer, "Somewhere in the Midwest." And I say, "Uh-oh, that's not Chicago." Because if it was in Chicago, then it would say Chicago. Both my husband and I are from Chicago. Our families still live there. And while it would be nice to go home and be more connected to extended family and relatives, we really want to be someplace that's not Chicago so that we are not obligated to come to every birthday party. So I checked the flyer more closely, and it turns out that the headhunter who was doing the recruiting was located in Kansas City. Kansas City, barbecue, I can get with that. So I said, "Great, go ahead, interview, do your best, good luck." It turns out, after he goes through part of the process, that the job is actually in Des Moines. "Iowa," I said. And he's like, "Yeah. The problem is, as a Chicagoan, we've been trained since birth to have a dislike and disrespect for three kinds of people: Hoosiers, those who live in Indiana; cheeseheads, Wisconsinites; and Hawkeyes, Iowans. After all, Iowa, in case you have forgotten during caucus time, is 92% white. So I was concerned about where I would get my hair done and whether there would be stockings in the color that I need in the Walgreens. But Eric needed a job, so we were moving. I called my mother to vent. I called her every night. Eventually she said, "Angie, I think you need to talk to somebody else other than me, because I have to go to bed, because I have to get up and go to work in the morning. So why don't you talk to your pastor?" Because I couldn't get in the queue for a professional therapist, a licensed therapist, because we didn't have insurance. That part of the insurance hadn't kicked in yet when my husband took his new job. So I went to my pastor, and she listened carefully, and she prayed, and she said, you know what? I think you need to talk to Lauren. And I knew Lauren. She was a member of the church, but I hadn't had a really relationship with her. So I called her, after my pastor gave her a heads up. And she lived down in Wesleyan, Connecticut, because she worked for the university. And she said we could have lunch. So I'm like, well, I have this baby. And she's like, bring her. So I'm like, okay. So I drive down to Wesleyan. We have lunch. And she said, you know what your problem is? I said, no, and got a little defensive. What's my problem? I mean, after all, it's Des Moines. She said, you must look at everything in life as a gift from God. And here you are complaining about the wrapping paper. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you know that I had cancer. And so, yes, because the whole church was praying for her. And she said, but I now look at cancer as a gift. I'm like, why? She said, I changed my whole lifestyle. I began to eat right. I got rid of negative energy in my life. I took a different job instead of trying to go after the most highly paid one, because I know that I need time for exercise and for gardening and the other things I love to do. And if I don't do that, then my body is out of whack. And I sleep 8 hours a day, if not sometimes 10, all because I know that if I don't take care of my health, I might have cancer again. And I looked at her and I'm like, so you're saying I should move to Des Moines? And she said, yes, because there's something there for you. Because if the Lord has you married to this man and he gets a job, you're not supposed to break up just because he moves to Des Moines. So I thanked her for lunch and I stomped out of the restaurant with giving her advice because I was not happy. That is not what I wanted to hear. But I went ahead and we moved to Des Moines. In fact, 3 days after I had lunch with Lauren, our house sold when it had been on the market for months with no interest whatsoever. I get down to Des Moines and we get a brand new house that's twice as big because the cost of living is so much cheaper there. And I also had asked for a place that had children the way I grew up, where you could just play outside and you wouldn't have to worry about anybody hurting them or snatching them. And here was a place where there were bicycles left in driveways. And then it turns out our next door neighbor on one side was expecting. She was going to have a little girl too, who was 6 months older than 6 months younger than my child. And so they became best friends, the kind of best friends where she would have to call me and say, Nanette's here, or I have to call her and say, Ellie's here, because they treated both houses as their own. And the neighbor on the other side, when we first moved in, she brought over a lemon poppy seed cake, warm from the oven. It was such a lovely community and good people that it wasn't about race or color. And that was even more obvious because when we walked to the caucuses to vote Barack Obama in as the winner of the Iowa caucuses, that neighborhood, that state did it. So now I've learned my lesson. Whenever an opportunity comes around that it doesn't seem like it would be something that I would do, I tell myself, everything God gives you is a gift, and you shouldn't complain about the wrapping paper. Thank you.
I love that story from Angie. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes that goes something like, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And Angie's story reminds us to peel back the wrapping and enjoy the gift that's underneath. Thank you so much, Angie, for that story. We're now going to move along to our final storyteller of the evening, and that storyteller is Diana Valentine. Now, Diana is known for spooky stories, but this morning she has turned the dial on spooky all the way down and turned up the dial on love and community. I'm sure you're going to love this story. Please join me in welcoming storyteller Diana Valentine.
Hi, I'm Diana Valentine. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to tell you about my garden. So we bought our home in 2018 and it was completely shrouded by half-dead white pines that were like 60 feet tall. And by early 2019, we were able to take all of them down, and it left our home looking very bare and naked, with a half-dead lawn to boot. My husband and I are not big mowers, so I said, don't worry about it. I'll make a garden. I don't know how to make a garden, but that's fine. I have plenty of friends and family who do, plus YouTube and British garden shows. Shout out to Monty Dunn. So just tell you a little bit about our garden. It's 150 feet long, 14 feet at its widest, 3 feet at its most narrow. And I was able to divide it up into a couple rooms. That's what I learned from everybody's advice, is you divide a garden like this into rooms or sections. So I'll tell you about my top 2 favorite rooms, and they're also coincidentally mostly done. I have a rock garden that's right near our driveway, covered in ground covers, and lots of wonderful rocks we found on the property. My favorite part of it is this weeping redbud that has beautiful burgundy heart-shaped leaves from the summer to the fall. I put it in last year. It is absolutely stunning. And then my next favorite room that I'm still working on, but mostly done, is a stumpery. If you don't know what a stumpery is, totally fine. I'm pretty sure they didn't know what it was when it was most popular in its Victorian time, but I gathered up a bunch of like the stumps and trunks from all the trees we had taken down, and I kind of plunked them in the middle of our yard. And then I planted in the nooks and crannies with some, flowers and perennials and really cute things. It took a while for the plants to take, so there was a moment that one of our neighbors were like, hey, so is this like firewood? And I was like, no, I'm doing this on purpose. And they were like, oh, and they walked around, but it's looking great now. I really was able to incorporate it. So at the beginning of the pandemic last year, the garden was heading into its first full year of being planted. I had spent 2019 just really going to town, and I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this garden as awesome as possible to cheer up my neighbors and bring a smile to them. And plus, I was going to have a lot of time at home, and it was a perfect opportunity to just dig in. And so I did. Around May, I started seeing art rocks creep into the garden. I don't know who was leaving them, but they were suns and hearts and cute symbols and cute words just kind of left around the garden. And throughout the summer, they rotated and there was added rocks. I have no idea who did this. I assume it was parents and kids. We live on a pretty foot traffic heavy road. There's a middle school at the end of our road. But during the pandemic, all of our neighbors were out and walking. And my goal with the garden was not only did, my husband and I not want to mow, but I also wanted to use it as an excuse to meet neighbors. And I did. I met a lot of neighbors and talked to a lot of them. Probably most of the time covered in dirt and leaves, and my hair's kind of wild on its own, but it just gets worse as I work in the garden. And it was amazing. And in the middle of the summer, around June, July, people started leaving plants in the garden, just wonderful perennials, no names. I have no idea who did this, but I incorporated the plants. At one point I was weeding, and a gentleman came over, kind of like a neighbor I didn't expect to come over, and he was carrying a potted plant. And I was really surprised. I was kind of sarcastic. I was like, oh, are you taking your plant on a walk? And he was like, no, this plant is for you. I've grown it for years in my garden, and I see you out here every day, and I just thought you would like it. And it was a little prickly pear cactus, and I was embarrassed. I was like, oh, thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Of course, I will treasure it. And so I planted it right away. And then at the end of the summer, someone gave me a lavender plant with a card this time, no name, just expressing that they loved the garden and made them smile, and they appreciated all my efforts. And then I had a neighbor who stopped by, and she said something that took my breath away. She said, this garden is amazing. Every time I walk by it, it makes me feel loved and safe. And then she walked away. I said, thank you. I've never thought about how the garden would make our neighbors feel. I thought it would, make them smile and give them something pretty to look at. But I never thought about how it would make them feel. And I never thought about them interacting with the garden, that it's become its own character in the neighborhood. It's become this accumulation community art project between me and the neighbors. That we are creating this garden together is an amazing feeling. And it was a perfect thing during the pandemic. And this year I've started gardening and neighbors are already stopping by asking if I need any plants. And it's lovely to talk to them and to meet them. And this garden has done way more for me and way more for the neighbors than I ever thought it would. It makes them feel loved and safe, and they integrate art into it, and it brings neighbors together and creates this garden with me. I mean, what more could you ask from a garden? Thank you so much.
Diana, thank you so much for that story. I have had the pleasure of seeing Diana's garden in person, and it is every bit as beautiful as I'm sure that you all are imagining it. Now, all the stories this morning, Diana's and everybody else's who came before, remind me of the time that I spent as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ecuador, which seems like a different lifetime ago. And I worked with this community organization of women. And whenever anyone would ask these women how they came together as an organization, they would tell a story about making a meal. And they would say, one of us had rice, one of us had oil, one of us had chicken, one of us had veggies, and alone, none of us had enough to do anything. But together we had dinner. And this organization, not unlike the Foundation for Metro West, that's what this is about. It's about coming together as an organization, bringing together, pooling together our resources, and making a real difference for our neighborhood and our communities. Now, in the spirit of community, I want to share the stage again with our Executive Director, Jay. So, Jay, take it away.
Thank you, Teresa. I don't know about all of you in the audience, but I'm feeling incredibly moved by these stories. It just goes to show that no matter where you are in the world, whether it's in your own backyards or in Des Moines, Iowa, feeling a sense of community can make a world of difference. If you're feeling as inspired and hopeful as I am, I ask that you consider making a gift to the Foundation for Metro West this morning. The Spring Inspiration Breakfast is one of our largest and most critical fundraising events of the year. And although we can't meet in person, we're so thankful that we've all been able to gather today. We need the support of our community to continue the work that we do. And right now we're about to move into the next phase of our emergency relief efforts coming out of this pandemic, and we're calling it the recovery phase. And while we've done some incredible work through these challenging times, we have yet to know the long-term effects of the pandemic on our neighbors, and we need to be prepared to stand by them now and in the future. So I thank you in advance for your generosity, and a huge thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today. Now, I would like to take this moment to honor someone very special to the Foundation for Metro West, our former Executive Director and our current Executive Director Emeritus, Judy Salerno. Many of you may know, Judy officially stepped down from her position at the beginning of this year, and she is still involved with the Foundation because we couldn't say goodbye just yet. And I think I speak for the entire Metro West community when I say, thank you, Judy, for molding the Foundation for Metro West into what it is today. We exist and make a difference in our community because of your hard work and dedication. Ladies and gentlemen, Judy Salerno.
Thank you, Jay, for those kind words. And good morning, everybody. Wow, what an incredible morning. From our storytellers to this year's honorees, Alice and Beth. the production team here at Amazing Things Art Center. I couldn't have imagined a better way to bring one of our biggest events of the year to the community. I'm definitely leaving today feeling hopeful and inspired. And I was asked to take a few minutes this morning to tell you a little bit about my personal journey and how I came to do this work. When I started at the foundation over 15 years ago, it was supposed to be a temporary position. I was on the board of the foundation, and it was then called the Crossroads Community Foundation. And when the executive director stepped down, I was asked to be a co-executive director. Similar to our storyteller, Sue, there was a moment where it really hit me that I was right where I was supposed to be. The Foundation for Metro West. The board asked, and I accepted at a later time, to become the permanent executive director. And I do have to say, I did not know it would be a 15-year gig, but it was been a great 15 years. As someone who grew up in Sudbury and I raised my family in Wellesley, I have deep Metro West roots and connections. I felt a strong pull to the region as a whole, and so saying yes to leading the Community Foundation felt very right for me. I recognized pretty early on that there was a significant amount of need that I was not aware of, and that a strong community foundation was really critical to help filling the gap between the needs that existed and the resources that are right here in the Metro West area. But I know also that that work could not be done by one individual or the community foundation. It required the support of our board and families in the area. And a lot of people engaging in creative ways and creative solutions to providing the resources to do our work. So in 2014 is when we launched our first community, our Spring Inspiration Breakfast. And wow, it has just grown to be one of the most special and important events for us, and really is a celebration of youth and family philanthropy. There were a lot of families doing work on the ground in the community, doing significant work to make an impact in our community. And it's something that I witnessed firsthand during my early years at the foundation, and most especially through our work with our Youth and Philanthropy program, getting the opportunity to work with area youth and their families. Today, I'm very proud of what this event has become. We do look forward to being together in person in the future, but even today, the amount of support that we've had, it has evolved as one of the largest fundraising events for the foundation, and it's something that I think many of us look forward to every single year. I'm excited to witness the continued growth of both this event and the foundation as a whole. And as I move to the next phase of my life, I'm filled with a lot of hope, not only for myself and what I'm going to be able to have the time to do, but for the foundation, its staff, and for the region as a whole. If we can continue to come together as a community and support our most vulnerable neighbors, there's no limit to what can be done and the quality of life that we can all retain and receive. It's not just during significant times of need like the pandemic, but also in the good times. Our community is based on a lot of people over hundreds of years doing really important, great acts of philanthropy, and that's what gives us the tools and resources that we have today to take care of each other. I challenge you to continue to draw on the foundation and the work of the foundation, to continue to be involved in local philanthropy and to support the foundation so that the foundation can continue to do the incredible work that we set out to do and started over 25 years ago. Some say good leaders know when it's time to step down, and for me, I feel really excited about the future of the foundation under the leadership of Jay. After 15 years, entrusting this organization to someone as capable and thoughtful as Jay really gives me great confidence about the future direction and the future of the impact that this organization can continue to have. I really believe that having a strong community foundation is really important for the long-term health and vitality of the region. You know, future generations will enjoy beautiful, prosperous, and fulfilled lives as long as we continue to do the work that we're doing. And with that, I have one final ask, which always I have to do, which is that please make a gift to the foundation. Whether you're passionate about arts and culture, the environment, racial equity, or youth enrichment, we're here to move the needle on those issues for the entire region. And we cannot do that without your support. There's a link in the chat section, or if you feel moved after the event, you can visit the website and make your gift there. But thank you so much to all of you for supporting us during this Spring Inspiration Breakfast over the last 7 years, and for supporting me as the executive director of the foundation for over 15 years. And I look forward to continue opportunities to see you all together in person next year. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, on behalf of the Foundation for Metro West, I would like to thank all of you at home this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I think if there's one message that you can take away from all of the stories and all of the things that you've heard this morning, it's that we as humans need to be connected, and we really can't continue to exist without our communities. I hope that you're feeling an overflow of inspiration and hope that has filled our virtual stage this morning, and I hope that you take that inspiration and remember to visit the foundation's website and make a gift to this incredible organization so that we can continue to do the critical work here in the Metro West community. Now, don't forget to save the date for next year's hopefully in-person breakfast on May 5th at the Wellesley Country Club. Thank you again for your generosity and for joining us this morning. Have a fantastic rest of your day.